years to only a couple of decades, close to what we see today. We had found phenomenal changes in the chemistry of the ice. We found that during the period when the ice sheets were starting to melt away, that we have more signals of volcanic deposition and of greater magnitude or greater concentrations than at any other time over the last 110,000 years that we've measured.
Unprecedented volcanic upheaval coupled with atmospheric turmoil and huge floods. For as ice sheets over a mile thick melted within decades, sea level shot up by 4,500 feet. Suddenly seas appeared where land had been.
You could walk from Great Britain to Scandinavia at a time when a climatic revolution shaped the North Sea. It was a time when great floods covered the plains of North America so that the skeletons of whales are found in Michigan. A time of cataclysm at the end of the Ice Age, which may fit the myth. In the New World alone, about 70 kinds of animals became extinct. Saber-toothed cats, mammoths, giant sloths, horses, camels. Let me just put that in perspective. Over the previous 200,000 years, less than 1/3 of that number had become extinct. And that same extraordinary pattern of extinction was repeated over Europe and Asia.
In the permafrost of Siberia and Alaska, tangled masses of bones are found of millions of animals which perished in a cataclysm. The giant mammoth didn't fall victim to the hunters of prehistory. He was felled by natural catastrophe. At the turn of the century, Siberian hunters stumbled across the frozen skull of one huge animal. When it was dug out and transported, its stomach was found to contain undigested plants from a temperate climate. The animal had been deep frozen faster than any modern freezer is capable of.
What is certain is that some 12 or 13,000 years ago, a terrible cold descended on Siberia and hasn't relaxed its grip ever since. This riddle of the instant frozen mammoths has given way to some strange anecdotes, some true, some untrue, like the mammoth steak served in Fairbanks, Alaska. But what is certainly authentic is a report by the Russian 19th century naturalist Baron Wrangel, who discovered Bear Island, which is north of Siberia, and where the sand was literally held together by reefs of bones and tusks of mammoths and other animals that had disappeared in some strange primeval catastrophe. These mass extinctions, this tremendous volcanic activity, this rapidity of the melting of the ice seems to suggest some enormous climatic revolution that took place about 12,000 years ago. There seems to be some unknown factor that we can't put our fingers on.
The end of the Ice Age. What made it a revolution? Here's the big question. What brought on cataclysm?
One of the best theories that has been put forward is by an American, Charles Hapgood, who suggested something he called earth crust displacement, which meant that the whole crust of the earth shifted around suddenly like the skin of an orange.
The whole outer shell of the earth, it's only 1/3 of 1% of the earth's mass, like the a peel of an orange. If it was loose, it moves.
Thinner than an eggshell, the earth's crust rests on a molten liquid interior. The ruling theory on the Earth's crust is that of plate tectonics, continents slowly drifting apart over hundreds of millions of years. Though science scorned the theory for over half a century, it now equally scorns the notion that the Earth's crust could move as a whole and suddenly. But one scientist was mesmerized by the idea. Had he lived longer, Earth crust displacement would have been considered more seriously. His name was Albert Einstein.
This is a summary of what he said. When I came across Hapgood's work, I was electrified. Here was an idea that was simple, but could explain a whole range of problems.
Hapgood had the theory The question was, what was the mechanism that set this whole gigantic thing in motion? And it was Einstein who came up with the suggestion. The enormous amount of ice that builds up around the poles can become 2 miles thick, ice that extended right into the middle of the continent of America. And these billions, countless billion tons of ice, if they formed in an imbalanced way, would cause the Earth, as it were, to judder like a wheel with a great weight placed on its rim. This judder would in fact be sufficient to cause that switching of the crust of the Earth.
55,000 years ago, the North Pole lay close to Europe, but suddenly swept to Hudson Bay in Canada. And around 12,500 BC, it suddenly shifted again, almost 2,000 miles to where it lies now. Or is it better to say the lands and seas have been swept across the pole, propelled by a sudden displacement of the Earth's crust? If so, this is one of the things which would have happened at the end of the Ice Age. The displacement propelled America out of the polar zone. The sea to the north of it froze over with a thin sheet only meters thick. The huge old ice sheet over North America, more than a mile thick, suddenly melted in a matter of years.
Now, what's so interesting about the Hapgood-Einstein theory is that it also explains all kinds of other myths quite apart from the myths of flood. There are myths of tremendous earthquakes, volcanic catastrophes, black rain falling from the sky, sudden freeze-ups of whole lands. And you can see that in point of fact this is precisely what would happen if the Earth's crust switched around. Quite suddenly, areas that had previously been freezing would suddenly be switched into hot regions. Things like that flash-frozen mammoth of Siberia. Whole species would be wiped out.
If an Earth crust displacement caused the deluge that destroyed a civilization, where was that civilization? Searchers believe to have found it on the Greek island of Santorini, once destroyed in a huge eruption, or in ancient Troy. The German island of Heligoland almost washed away by the North Sea. They have searched for sunken continents in the Atlantic Ocean, but nothing has been found.
And it's this exact problem that scuppered Plato's Atlantis as an ocean for serious scholars. You see, oceanographers have mapped the floor of the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, and there's no lost continent. Or is there?
In Plato's account of Atlantis, he describes the island as a vast island continent with mountains in the middle of the real ocean. And the real ocean, of course, is the world ocean. It was only later that we began to divide the ocean up into different parts, calling it Atlantic and Pacific, etc. In reality, the world only has one ocean. And the myths from around the world, some of them are very explicit about what happens in the Zen Vesta of the Vedic literature. The island continent is destroyed not only in a deluge, but it is covered in snow and ice. So we're looking for an ice-covered island in the middle of the ocean, and there is a great candidate in Antarctica.
If the North